sports, winning isn't everything. But in franchising, winning means growth. And the team at Fundraising University is putting up a lot of W's. Fundraising University has a very specific mission. It helps school sports teams set and achieve their fundraising goals. And then it helps build strategies to bring even greater growth in subsequent seasons. And it does it so well that for the third year in a row, it is the #1 fundraising brand on Entrepreneur Magazine's Franchise 500. Hi, my name is Jason Pfeiffer, editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. When Entrepreneur evaluates franchises for the Franchise 500, we look at more than 150 data points, including very visible ones like size and growth, but we're also taking a holistic view of the business, the industry it operates in, and the opportunities available to prospective franchisees. That includes things like franchisee support and training, but we're also looking at brand strength and marketing and more. So what made Fundraising University so successful enough that it held the 491st spot? Well, this unique brand was founded in 2009, and it's been franchising since 2020. In that time, it's opened 74 total units across the US and has grown more than 60% over the last 3 years. But like I said, growth isn't the only thing we look for. And in Fundraising University, we saw a unique level of franchisee support. In fact, Fundraising University scores in the top 10% for support across the entire ranking. Franchisees work with their own coach, who is a professionally trained mediator with extensive experience in both entrepreneurship and sports, often spanning many years. And last year, Fundraising University rolled out a new comprehensive CRM system for its franchisees, as well as a learning management system for ongoing franchisee development. That is great teamwork. But perhaps most important of all, the success at Fundraising University translates to the local sports teams that it supports. Franchisees have helped those teams raise $150 million. So congratulations to the team at Fundraising University for another great year on the Franchise 500.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Really excited to be here. Appreciate the invite. So this is, we started, Aspire Volleyball started in 2007. I can give you all the details of how that happened back in the day, but I don't want to bore anybody with anything, but we've grown from an inaugural year of one total team, and it was just a girls team, to now we have 20, 24 girls teams and 22 boys teams. So we've got nearly 50 teams on both, with both genders. We run, the club teams that are your high level competitive teams that compete around the country. And then we also have a pretty extensive summer program where it's a rec league that we bring in some of the kids that are kind of just starting and just learning and just growing. So we offer a little bit of everything. We have a pretty robust adult offering as well, where we we run some adult tournaments and some adult open gyms. So we kind of pride ourselves on being a one-stop shop for volleyball in Arizona and in the Valley here. And we're continuing to grow. We're excited for what the future holds. We're part of a great organization called League One Volleyball that is buying up a bunch of clubs around the country. So we're kind of a small cog in a bigger ecosystem of volleyball, and they've started a professional league for women here in the United States. So we're watching volleyball grow exponentially before our eyes over the last 5 years, and we're excited to be a part of all that and kind of be right in the middle. And coaching and youth has always been a passion of mine. I'm a Spanish teacher by day and a volleyball director by night. So I spend my days, in the trenches with the high school kids, and it's always been a passion of mine to help kids grow and learn and find their place in the world. And volleyball and Spanish just happen to kind of be that sort of engine that makes that go. So excited to be here and share some ideas with you, and hopefully we can learn together.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well today. My name's Kelly Stinnett. Fortunate enough to play 17 years of pro ball. Went to junior college in Oklahoma, junior college player of the year. Played a lot of baseball. That's before we had game limits. I tell everybody when I recruit kids here of the games I played at the college level. Our freshman year, we were 79-23. My sophomore year, we were 89-5. So we played a lot of baseball, and we did not like to lose. So that's kind of, that's my background, and hopefully it doesn't tie too much in the travel ball nowadays. But we going from there. Was fortunate enough to be drafted by the Cleveland Indians in the 11th round. Worked my way up, Rule 5 by the Mets. Played 14 years, give or take.
You got cut.
You got me? I know I got cut, huh? Can you hear me? Hey. So we're in high school. We're on a limited budget, man. I only get so much internet service during the day. Yeah. But that being said, I was fortunate enough to play up until 2007, and I started club teams after that. Ran that till about 2 summers ago. This thing keeps messing up. There we go. So ran club teams up until 2 summers ago. Still in the club ball business with my youngest son. He's 16, so that's what I did most of the summer, was out recruiting, following him around, helping him develop, and kind of keeping an eye on players that we can bring here at Park, and also keep an eye on the craziness that's going out there. Is kind of what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully we can be a voice in helping helping coaches at all levels kind of let's develop, and let's ease these kids into whatever levels they're going to, high school, junior high, or the college level. So appreciate you having me here, Mike.
one of the devil's biggest gifts to the American marriage.
It sounds like opportunity, competition, discipline, and teamwork.
But let's shoot it straight. It's really every weekend on the road, every dollar thrown at gear, hotels, gas, and fees, every dinner rushed, and every church service missed, and every moment of margin erased.
And what gets sacrificed? God, marriage, peace, and purpose.
Kids become the center of the family, and parents become Uber drivers, hotel bookers, and bank accounts, not spiritual leaders, lovers, or mission-minded disciples.
And here's the truth, most won't say out loud.
You're not raising champions, you're raising busy, overstimulated, distracted kids who are learning that
God comes second, marriage is optional, and life is about them.
travel sports might be one of the devil's biggest gifts to the American marriage.
It sounds like opportunity, competition, discipline, and teamwork.
But let's shoot it straight. It's really every weekend on the road,
For me, and this goes back to even childhood, I mean, there's just so many lessons that can be learned while playing sports, life lessons. You know, obviously it's changed dramatically since I was a kid playing in the 80s and the 90s. And, you know, so it's become significantly more competitive and more specialized, right? I mean, you know, us old guys on here can talk about playing 4 or 5 different sports growing up, right? And trying to compete at everything. And, you know, we get athletes all the time and they've never even put a baseball glove on and learn how to throw a ball, right? I've only ever done one sport. And, you know, so for me, that's the sad part about where we've come. But you know, that video is a tough one, right? There's a lot of responsibility. I think that it gets lost by coaches and clubs and people running these organizations where we're trying to create good human beings more than good athletes. The good athlete part is just a byproduct of you know, how we approach it, and sacrificing family and God and those things they talked about just is, for me anyways, and the way we try to run things at Aspire and how I've done things in my career is sacrificing those things is not part of what we do. I tell my coaches all the time, and I tell the families all the time, family comes first. If you have responsibilities and you have things that you feel like are more important than volleyball, I'm not going to second guess you, and I'm going to allow you to do those things that are important to you, because ultimately the ball stops bouncing for everybody at some point. And if that ball stops bouncing and you have no foundation of who you are as a person, you know, your relationship with God, if that's important, or how you build relationships with people, you know, your marriage, that kind of thing. If you haven't learned that stuff along the way, then you just did it wrong. So I think it's the responsibility to create human beings more so than athletes, I think, is the biggest thing that we can do better moving forward. You know, as you get these little kids, especially when you get them young, right? They're so impressionable, they learn so fast, and they lean on every word you're saying. So if you come in and you're you know, all sport, all technique, all fundamentals, and there's no communication about life and who we are and how all this fits into who they're becoming, they're only going to learn one thing from you, and I think that's a travesty.
Yeah, it's just, don't want to beat a dead horse, but the same thing is everything's specialized now. And that's why I like the high schools or the athletes that do play multiple sports. I know my younger son is, he's going to play football and baseball, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to see kids develop in different ways, and the beating their head of winning at all costs. You see 8, 9 year old teams where coaches are getting thrown out, and it's just not. And trust me, I was there when I first started it, getting out of pro ball. I was fiery. I wanted the best for my kids. I wanted to win. And I finally had to take a step back and hey, it's about these little guys, and how can we develop them? How can we make them, for one, have good grades in class, and be respectful of adults, and enjoy your family time while you can. And I finally, later on, when I was doing club ball, is we stayed away from major holidays. I didn't play baseball during Christmas. We took Thanksgiving off, spring break. Hey, go enjoy it. Because if you're going to play baseball at the next level, you never get a spring break until you're done playing. So that's one thing I emphasize. Hey, just have fun, enjoy the holidays. And it took me a while to get, to come around as well. And, we see that every weekend when I'm out coaching club ball up to 16, 17, 18-year-old level. So, we just want to teach the guys, have fun. Well, I try to teach from my own experience being I wasn't quote unquote an everyday catcher in the big leagues, but there's no reason, there's no doubt in my mind why I'm at this level and why I understand the game so much. Is because I was on the bench quite a bit, and I sat by Joe Torre and and Buck Showalter and Phil Garner and Dallas Green, all those big name managers that's won World Series and learned the game. And I tried to emphasize when we did this with my parents, obviously you want to keep a small roster, 11, 12, but then you feel obligated, like you said, is that they're going to hand you a check or give you some cash. Well, little Joey's got to play. Little Joey's got to get out there and get some time at shortstop. Well, we try to emphasize, hey, we're going to move them around. And that's part about picking the right organization, I guess, as well. Certain organizations do emphasize development. We're going to move guys around. Guys are going to sit the bench. We're going to try to keep it as equal as possible. Especially in Arizona, we need a lot of bodies during the summer because kids fall off or kids get hurt, kids get tired, families go on vacation. So I would just suggest organizations just be well-rounded in how you develop kids and give them equal amount of playing time. I mean, everybody's not a shortstop. Everybody's not going to be a center fielder. Everybody's not going to be, your starting pitcher, but develop them and just don't chase the wins. That's the one thing that, I think I'm proud of is we developed, we didn't chase the wins, and kids got to the next level. And if they got to the next level, they got to the degree, and they end up being good human beings.
Well, Kelly, I told my Little League baseball coach, who was my dad, that I was a shortstop. He put me at first base, so we're still at all. Yeah, they make the guy, put the tall kid over there, let him catch stuff. No, the transaction part is the hardest part of what we do, as a from the coaching side of things, because everybody's competitive. Everybody wants to win, but ultimately, when you put your kid in some sort of club sport like this, they're looking to see improvement. And I tell my coach all the time, look, parents just really want to see two things. They want to see that their kid is improving, and then they want to see them play. And so you have to try to balance the two. And so what we try to work really hard at is communication up front. When you're building a team of 12 and only 6 girls or boys play at a time, that's where making sure parents know, like, listen, you're in a competition with another girl. We're going to play as much as you can, but ultimately the reality is you might not necessarily play a lot. So consider that part of it when you are, writing that check every month, and, putting your kid out there and expecting to see them play, and they may not play as much. And that part obviously is very hard. But then from a parental perspective, there's still so many things that you can communicate with your kid that are beneficial, maybe even more so when they're not playing than when they are. I have parents all the time ask me, what's an ideal looking team for you? And I joke with them. I tell them it's a team full of orphans, right? Because then I don't have any parents breathing down my neck wanting playing time, but if we can't do it together, then what are we doing? So I look back as just a year ago, my own daughter was in a situation where she wasn't playing a lot. And the coach happened to be one of my best friends who also works at the club with me. And, I had to have many conversations with her about what other lessons can we learn? What are you doing in practice? How are you being as a teammate? All of those things that make us ultimately good people. And then that transaction doesn't necessarily matter anymore in, minutes played and that kind of thing. What matters is that your kid is ultimately becoming a better person and a better athlete. Kelly talked about sitting on the bench next to some of those Hall of Famers. Learning things from other people comes in a lot of different ways. And ultimately, if we learn, we're going to be better. And, if you have a closed mind about that, and you're upset about having to sit on the bench next to Joe Torre, then you might not actually learn anything, right? And so being understanding that might be your role, and you need to be ready to learn is certainly a part of the parent side of that they can help their kids with, and then it makes that money part not necessarily as painful when you don't see your kid on the court. I wish mine was only 75%, Mike. It's probably 100%. And every phone call you get, it's like, I'm concerned about my kid, and I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about what the problem is. And they know that the playing time is kind of non-negotiable, right? So we try to find this other way to sneak into it, and then ultimately it comes down to, well, my kid doesn't play that much, and so it's a big one for sure. I think the interesting part is going to be um, what each sport lends itself to, right? I mean, for volleyball, we're kind of built into our schedule already, and this is what we do, and so the percentages kind of get tricky, and but I try to kind of be quite okay. So 2 practices per game, like I mean, that the biggest problem with I think youth sports in general is we play too much, right? And we don't train enough as far as just the athletes are concerned, right? Physically, especially some of these young women in my organization as they're growing and developing, they're physically not built to play that many matches, and that's a big concern of mine. And become to the point where I don't even know what it is, Mike. Now you've piqued my interest as how many practices we have compared to matches. So I'll have to actually dive into that a little bit. But I think that setting some sort of boundary like that's really important. And having playing time discussions at the beginning, I think is the best way to kind of bring everybody together instead of divide us. And there's a comment on there from Brian who talked about having that early season parent meeting to determine what that playing time looks like, and then you deal with less issues. And so I think that's a great way to keep everybody involved, and then everybody makes their decision. Right, here's what is in front of you. This is how much your kid's going to play at a bare minimum. Is it still worth the money to you to train with us? And so, I mean, that's probably the easiest way to just keep everybody on the same page and have parents understand, like, your kid played the minimum, and we warned you that could happen, and then those issues just go away. So certainly a good idea.
Well, I mean, I invested in getting a warehouse and putting some cages up so we could work on the development. Uh, and I agree with Ryan. I mean, these kids play too much and they don't develop enough. One of my weekends, since, I want to make sure kids are making the practices, because that's the other thing that happens is, you have a field practice, you got a cage practice, and, little Joey decides to take the week off, but he expects to play on the weekends. Well, that's another issue that, that we have to address. But for the weekends, everybody played on, the pool days on Saturday when the brackets came out. That's before Game Changer, so I really couldn't keep up with it back then. But, your best hitters or your guy that didn't make errors had more of an opportunity to play on the bracket day. So I expressed that to the parents that, whoever played the best on Saturday and everybody's going to play. We'll figure out the lineups on Sunday to try to give them some kind of initiative. The kids got to make their practices. That way we know they're ready and they're performing well on Saturday to get to Sunday. The other thing I incorporated, and I think it helped out quite a bit, and it's not so much on playing time, is I incorporated 24-hour rule. I'm like, hey, mom and dad, game's over, call me in 24 hours. And very, very, very rarely did they ever get a call after that. They kind of got in the car, maybe analyzed it for the day, and maybe kind of saw the big picture, because you can understand parents have these on. We're coaches, we see the whole field or the whole court, Ryan, but these parents, I mean, they got blinders on. They only see one person and one person only out there playing. Mhm. Mhm. Well, what I tried to do is I've gone kind of a different way. Instead of doing a Saturday play to Sunday, is I try to just map out the whole weekend. All right, here's 1 through 7, and this is what it is. And we try to make it even. Like, so now with Game Changer, it's actually you can keep up with more who's playing what. Okay, I've got to get him more bats, or I've got to get him more innings on the mound. So I'm able to keep up with it more when we're running teams nowadays. I mean, you talk about that and development. I mean, it's funny stories. Last fall, we're playing a team. We're getting it kicked pretty good. They got a first and third situation, one out. Run rule going into the fifth inning. The winning run is on third base with the run rule, and the other team squeezes. Now you're talking about no development. Let the guy hitting drive him in, maybe play an extra inning. So that's what we're dealing with now. And this is at a 16 high-end perfect game event that guys are doing this. But I think the big thing is I just try to plan out the whole weekend. I think I've gotten a lot better at that. That way everybody knows where they're at. And if for some reason I just apologize to the kid and say, hey, Joey, we just kicked the dog out of him today. Sorry, hopefully we can get you in there. You'll start tomorrow and go get them.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're up 12-1 with the Diamondbacks bullpen, you still need to score more points, right? So we might not be subbing at that point, but that's a tricky one. I think part of it is where you're at in your season. I think about like my high school team. I coach, the high school boys team at Perry High School here in Arizona, and beginning of the year, we're subbing guys in, we're developing, we're finding, time for everybody. And then at some point we say, okay, guys, here's the deal. Like, I don't care if we're up 25, 21 to 5. If it's a playoff game or if it's a game we really need to win, we're going to push and we're going to win. And we don't want to make those changes. But gosh, it's a hard one, Mike. I'm interested to hear what you say. Like, as a first-year coach, I was coaching a JV basketball team out at Desert Vista High School, and fresh out of college, first job. I want to do a good job. I want to make sure I'm developing the kids. I got all these things going through my mind, and we were slapping St. Mary's JV team around, and we were up by 20, and there's 7 or 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I'm like, all right, this is great. Let's throw the bench in. Let's get them playing time. 2 minutes left in the game, I put my starters back in because now all of a sudden it's a 5-point game. We're like, all right, I can't lose this one, right? So it's hard. You get snake bitten a little bit. So I'll tell you what, those guys didn't play for a long time because I wanted to make sure I knew what we had. But then I go all the way back to when I was a kid. I was, freshman year. I was, I don't know, maybe 5'9". I was the 13th guy on the bench in a basketball team that went 17-0 and undefeated, and we were up by 25 by halftime in 3/4 of our games, and I didn't get in until the last minute. And I look back and I'm like, Coach had no idea I'd be 6'5", a couple years later and starting on the varsity team, and because I just had grown, I had developed. But I'm sure he would have loved to play me more as a freshman, so that I had some of those moments to draw from as I got older. But it's like, I don't know, it's a rock and hard place, right? We want to develop kids. We want to give them opportunities. You don't know what they're going to look like a year or two later. You don't know if you're going to need them down the road. That's partly why as your season goes, maybe it changes. You got to have kiddos ready. A sprained ankle away from needing that kid on the end of the bench who, if you buried down there the first, 2 months of the season, now all of a sudden you're looking at it going, wow, I wish I'd have played that kid. So it's a really tough spot to be in for sure.
Frustrated when you were coming off the bench or whatever. And I thought it was great that you said, with patience, you have to be impatient.
Yes.
But you can't get frustrated.
No. And that, yeah, for me, it was, okay, well, why am I not playing? What can I do differently?
Right.
I have to be better. All right, well, then that's not good enough. Then I have to be twice as good, right? And for me, it was a challenge of getting to a place where it's undeniable. You have to play me because I'm that efficient. I'm strong at both ends of the floor. So it actually helped me, because I was coming off the bench for the first 2 years. It was like, okay, I have to figure this out. I have to be, right? So I use it as a source of motivation, not to get frustrated and complain and whine about it.
But you were being responsible for your own self-determination. We're taking ownership and being accountable for what you had to do so that you could be successful, which was the ultimate goal.
It's also the strength, too, of being able to tell your family members and your friends to shut up. Because, they'll be like, oh, you should be starting. Oh, you should be playing. I don't know what they're doing. Shut up. If I'm not playing, I need to get better at this. I need to be better at that. There's things I can control, and this is what I'm going. But unfortunately, there's a lot of noise, a lot of outside noise from friends and former coaches and all sorts of stuff, filling your head with nonsense. And you have to be able to have the strength to edit that and say, no, I don't want to hear it. This is on me.
Right.
And
why didn't you get frustrated?
Yeah, well, it's kind of building off of what Coach Stinnett said, and I agree. I adopt kind of the 24-hour rule, but our tournaments always end on Sundays. So I don't I don't meet with parents after the tournament on Sunday, and Mondays are off days. They can't call me on Mondays. And that usually, I almost never get a call on Tuesday. They've worked themselves out of the panic that they were in post-tournament. And then to just address the playing time issue, it's really different. So we have 14 teams from 8U to 18U, and almost all of the playing time, questions and concerns are from like 14U and under. They're the ones that create all the chaos, and because yeah, exactly. And and most of it is that they paid their team fees and they're entitled to playing time. And some of that's true. And I believe we have a real obligation to develop kids, and that needs to be the focus. But our kids really understand at 16, and then I coached the 18U team only for a lot of reasons. But we had our number one pitcher was going to Stanford, our number two pitcher was going to Kentucky. They have to be ready to play and compete. So we would play pretty open. In softball, we have a couple of rules that are different than you, Coach Stinnett. We can bat 11 or 12 during full play games. So we can, we have what we call POs, pitcher only. So they don't hit and they don't play field. So I can bat somebody for them. And then we have a reentry rule where we can bring a kid in to pinch hit and then pull it right back out and put the player back in the game that we just pinch hit for. So there's some flexibility in our game that allows us to get these kids on the field. But I want to throw out one question to the group too. You mentioned carrying smaller rosters, and that's key. But I don't know what your tournaments are like, but for us to play in some of these tournaments, it's $4,000 to get in. We carry a small roster. we can't pay for anything, or our fees become so giant for each family that we can't even play but 3 or 4 tournaments. So we don't carry rosters just to have the finances, but we normally carry about 15, 16 in softball just to be able to build a team and to pay these outrageous tournament fees.
I loved what Patrick said about his softball league and some of the rules that they have that allow for some of these kids to play. Why not? Why not have rules that benefit kids? That would be a very weird situation to be in, where you have an organization that's set up that literally is designed to help our kids. I think all too often some of these organizations we associate with, because we have to. It's where you go to play the sports or whatever. They're just moneymakers, right? AAU and even USA Volleyball that we're associated with, there's moneymakers. Why not change the format a little bit? Why not tweak a couple of rules, benefit a kid at some point? That might work. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So, first off, I just want to say that, I'm thankful to be here, because for some time I've been concerned about, youth sports in the direction that it's going, and to have a space like this where we can communicate those concerns, I think it's important, right? And so for me, I always come from a personal development, perspective, Mike, as you know. some of the things that I speak about. And whenever a coach will pull me in to speak with his team or to kind of do some mental performance coaching with his team, one of the first things that I always say, the boundary that I set with his coaches and with his players, is I'm here to develop people, not players. And for the players, that gets them every single time. But what I, kind of goes back to what, Kelly and Ryan, what you all were saying earlier, is where, who you are as a person is exactly who you are as a player on the field, right? Or on the court, right? And so for me, it's extremely important to focus on that, the Kobe Bryant example. There's no doubt in my mind that Kobe was exactly who he was on the court, off the court, right? And that's exactly why we got who we got on the court from Kobe Bryant. And so that's extremely important. So I think, one of the things about youth sports is, from a parent's perspective, we focus solely on winning, right? The team is winning, right? We focus solely on my child getting in the game, but the development aspect is missing, right? And so when we speak about, the leagues, Ryan, what you were just saying, or piggybacking off of what Patrick was just saying, how do we benefit these kids most? I may be going a little far-fetched with this, but, back in my time, it was, we had those developmental leagues, right? Mike, you talking about Open and USA, right? We had those developmental leagues because not every kid is currently capable of playing at those high levels, right? And so how do we get the biggest bang for our buck? For me, I believe that it's important to have those kids, have those developmental leagues for those kids, or those developmental options for those kids, or those rules, or those boundaries, kind of like Patrick said. And so that's extremely important, because somebody, I was a late bloomer. Yeah, I made it to the NFL, but to be honest with you all, I really didn't blossom until my sophomore year in college, right? And had I not had those developmental opportunities over time, my confidence may have been shot. I may have given up on the sport, right? And so I see that happening so much with kids. And then, obviously the parent aspect that, is beautiful to have those rules that you all are speaking about, those boundaries that you all are speaking about, because sometimes parents, they can stick their hands in the situation and muddy that water, right? And so, yeah, for me, I think it's very important to come from a developmental standpoint and also helping these parents develop. Right, I think that's a big thing. We need to help on they need help on their perspective as well, because sometimes they overshoot on what they believe about their children, and sometimes your child just isn't ready yet, right? And when you're trying to push the envelope a little too soon, again, that's not a helpful situation for the coach, for the team, or for your child, right? So I would love to see it. I talk with my old lady about it all the time. If I could just create a program for parents to get some mental performance coaching about their children, right? And some honest conversations about their children, not to beat them down, but just to bring you say what, Mike? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I 100% agree. That's a beautiful idea. Yeah. Engaging with those parents, again, creating boundaries like you all spoke about, because I think that could be extremely helpful for the coaches, for the program, if we could really help the parents understand how they could be utilized, how they could be useful. So, yeah, so that's my 2 cents. That's my perspective. It's all about just the overall development for the entirety of, the environment. So, yep.
Yeah, that was great stuff, Samuel. I appreciate you, Mike. Actually, on the top of my notes, something you said earlier, Mike, select versus travel, and back in our day in the 80s and 90s, there was one team per region. At least here in where I grew up in New York, and now I'm in Jersey, it was the same. Now it's a money business, and parents, a lot of them, as my dad, who Mike used to call them jock sniffers, never even played Little League, or maybe they just only played Little League or CYO basketball. But Coach Samuel, educating parents is the number one thing on my list. Now I do with my parents. I run a youth baseball organization, 7 to 12, travel and rec, and then the basketball program. I do it individually with my parents, but I have still thrown all 3 kids out of my first 4 years. We're going into 10U, and about to maybe potentially throw a kid off second time and the final time because of problem parents. But educating them on the real levels and the expectations of what they're really in. If you're the club team and you're the third level of it and you're paying $5,000 a year, well, what's really going on here? So I thought that was great stuff, and I think there's definitely a deeper level, as you guys, as Coach Samuel said. Something I started this year was carrying 3 practice players for my youth travel baseball program to start over the winter for our winter workouts, meeting with the parents, and then the kids, gave them the option. And I actually called one of the kids up this year due to his hard work, his consistency, coming to games, even though he's not going to play. But the biggest thing when you're setting expectations with the players and the parents is, their expectations can't exceed the effort. And, it's an important thing. You can't come to practice twice a week and expect, because I've been here, I've had a good attitude, but you're not doing anything consistently or routinely on a daily basis when you're away from the team, especially at a youth level. My biggest question though is, how do you deal with the parents that are very hard to, maybe even belligerent with their own kids, and not maybe necessarily on the field, but you'll see it time to time. Maybe they sneak it in, at least on my end. But conversations after conversations, and kids, especially on a younger level, the kids, they get tight, they cry, even still at this age. And any of the coaches out here, maybe some advice on that. Yeah, and I'm not talking the crazy parent in the middle of the game where the kid strikes out and they're screaming and yelling, but it's usually the sly little comment. You've had multiple conversations with them. The kid's a good kid, but then they start folding, or he's maybe overworking them. That jock sniffer type, living vicariously through their kid and over pushing them, overworking them, making them practice till they're crying and that kind of thing on the off days. Just how do you deal with that overbearing parent, not necessarily to the coach, but where it's almost even abusive to the kid?
Well, Brian, I mean,
Hey, yeah, yeah, Coach, can you hear me? I'm on a drive. I just want to make sure that you got me. Okay. Yeah, so couple of things that I did within my baseball club just to kind of create the environment that you're talking about, specifically with coaching the athlete and having them develop, is I'd had all my coaches do an initial survey with the athlete. Like, obviously, we would profile them at a certain position, and then we would just, plain and simple, just say, hey, where do you want to hit? Like, where would you love to hit in the order? And where would you want to play? And so we always took the approach of like, and so inside of that space, he might profile as an outfielder, but then we take opportunities now to plug him in at third base during practice. And then the athletes and like what they were striving for. You got me, Coach? You got me?
is up and the goals of the athletes. And so then they would switch them up during the game while they're on the bench watching the third baseman. When the opportunities came, we'd plug them into third base. If they didn't do the bunt coverage the right way, but they had produced in practice, well, then now we know we have a mental performance gap, you know, where they weren't. And I care about. Okay.
Appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.